health. It's obviously the body representing doctors, a very important role in our NHS, in our health service. But extraordinary, they have voted today to adopt as their formal policy the decriminalisation of abortion up to the point of birth. Now, currently, it is the law that a woman can abort a baby up to 24 weeks as long as two doctors agree that continuing the pregnancy is harmful for her or for the unborn child. It pretty much means whether the baby is completely healthy or not, you can abort the baby. But it can be permitted beyond that limit if there are exceptional circumstances. Very few babies are actually aborted after 24 weeks because any disabilities are normally known before then. But if a severe disability is discovered, often the baby can be aborted. Now, currently, if you aborted a baby that was healthy, that would be a criminal offence. And if abortion were decriminalised, women could have terminations right up to birth for any reason at all. Now, the BMA has voted on this, and there's been a very big issue, big battles within the British Medical Association about this, about what they believe could be severely damaging the reputation of the profession. But this is more about, sort of, they argue, women's rights and not criminalising a woman doing what she wants with her body than about, they say, killing babies. But how would everyone else view it? Well, we did actually ask to speak to anybody from the BMA or any of the abortion rights groups, but unable to speak to them to come and join this debate. However, we did speak to Dr. Anthony McCarthy on the line. He's there. He's Director of Education at the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, the pro-life campaign group, and joins us now. Anthony, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, I have to say, I'm not normally on the side of pro-life groups on this issue, but I think on this one I may well find myself on your side. I am quite appalled by this vote. What do you think it means in practice?
Well, I think it's. I don't think you're alone there. I think it's quite an extreme vote. I mean, we saw a Comres poll recently. Sounded that only 1% of women wanted to see the time limit for abortion extended above 24 weeks. So this is going way against the general population, both pro-life and pro-choice. I think that we've seen on the BMA Medical Ethics Committee some very extreme sort of hardline ideologists who've been pushing for this kind of thing. They include Dr. Wendy Savage, who's fully in favour of sex-selective abortions up to birth. And they've seen a chance, framing it in the language of decriminalisation, to try and forward an agenda which treats abortion as though it's just like having a toenail removed, that it just needs consent, that it doesn't need to be treated any differently than anything else. Well, that's not how most people see it. Most people see it as a very serious matter. They take slightly different views on it, but generally speaking, they think that women need a great deal of care, it needs a lot of sensitivity, we need to have a lot of medical discussion. And I think it's very sad that this view has now been pushed via the BMA, which is basically the trade union of doctors, to become part of an agenda which really has nothing to do with medicine and has everything to do with the abortion.
It's become a debate, and it's certainly like this in America, where there's rates seems to be. It's absolutely up to women to do what they want with their own bodies, or it's all about I think the view that your organisation comes from. The baby has equal rights with a grown human being from the moment it's conceived, and therefore abortion is murder. And I think most people, including me, I think, are somewhere in the middle there, and accept that. I mean, I've never had an abortion myself. I don't know whether I would be able to have an abortion. I've lost 4 babies to miscarriage, and I know what a baby looks like at 12 weeks, and I know what a baby looks like at 20 weeks and 24 weeks. And I think to pretend that that's not a human being, I think is a little bit bizarre. But I also accept, I think that babies have fewer rights than their mothers up to a certain point. That's where and our law suggests that is the case. But I have to say, the idea that we would say that it would be legal for a woman to abort a perfectly healthy baby up to 8-9 months, it's utterly repulsive to me. Whereas if the day after the baby was born, if she killed the baby, she would go to prison for murder. It seems very strange to have that cut-off point. But I suppose a lot of people would argue the cut-off point at 24 weeks is strange. But of course, that has been set at where babies viably can live. And some people are calling for it to maybe move to 22 weeks. But there seems to be a settled view around the world that around the 24-week mark is around the point at which babies are considered to be viable outside the womb, have a chance of living, and therefore that's set at that stage. But there is an argument, given that we haven't got the pro-choice people to put their case, there is an argument that they give that whether or not you have laws on this and whether or not you actually provide this service in any way, having women criminalised for an abortion at a later date is not the solution. And there are just tiny numbers of abortion at a late rate, and nearly always they are for medical reasons, are they not?
Well, I mean, I think it's a bit of a red herring, the criminalisation thing, because there's only been a couple of prosecutions of women since 1967. These were extremely late abortions. They weren't anything like the kind of cases we're sometimes told about, fictional cases that are put out by the other side. So I really think it's a red herring. The point about criminalisation, I would say, though, is that it does show that society still takes certain things seriously. It's not about sort of attacking, prosecuting women, but if abortionists are doing things that they think they can get away with and that are absolutely morally outrageous, I think it's appropriate that a society says this isn't just like any other medical operation. You are actually abusing the medical profession in order to carry out these abortions, and there are criminal sanctions about those kinds of things. It's about, as I said before, it's about taking these things seriously. You talk about miscarriages. These are serious things. And I think that this whole move, obviously I'm against all abortion, but this whole move is further trivializing the whole area of medical practice concerned with a very intimate part of a woman's life, which is namely herself and her unborn child.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've never thought of, as a feminist, I've never thought of, the right to abort as a key feminist issue. It seems to me the right to contraception, to not get pregnant, is a key feminist issue. And one of the things I would really like the anti-abortion campaigners like yourselves to do is spend an awful lot more time worrying about making sure women have got contraception rather than dealing with the issue later. But the reality is only 0.1% of all abortions in this country take place after that 24-week limit. And I do know friends who have gone through this absolutely harrowing experience with a severely disabled baby that was never going to survive, literally never going to survive out of the womb, and making that decision to abort on medical advice. Absolutely heartbroken, and to this day heartbroken about it. And even at 23 weeks within the law, but that's after, of course, the key scans are at 12 weeks and around 20 weeks, and that's the point at which they will know that there is some severe disability. Only 680, 2016, only 682 abortions took place at 23 weeks. Clearly, this is not something that's happening on a mass scale. Clearly, this is something that is taking place only as a last resort for women in great distress. I mean, I don't think we're seeing women walking around saying, yeah, I'll just go through all the horrors of pregnancy and the morning sickness and all the damage to my body, but then I'll just abort at 8 months. That's not going to happen, is it?
Well, I think clearly if people do wish to avoid the very distressing nature of that, but I think, a society which, for instance, discriminates in this way against lethally disabled babies, for example, discriminates lethally against them, is one that is going to make certain things more common, and some of those late abortions are precisely about them. And I think we do have to look at that and say, is that a good way to treat an 8-month-old disabled baby? I think that's.
But realistically, you do realistically
question.
think that's going to happen?
Do I think people are going to take it seriously, or
no? That people are going to be, for needlessly, unnecessarily waiting until say 8-9 months to kill.
I'm thinking that
kill their baby.
The reason I mentioned the disability question is obviously, in terms of detecting certain kinds of disability, that will take longer, and that's why you get the later kind of abortions. And I think that does raise a question as to, what is our attitude to disabled people? If we think that those are somehow, that suddenly
disposable
makes it okay, obviously it's very distressing, and obviously, it's an extremely difficult area. But nevertheless, because a child is disabled, they should not be discriminated against. We don't see that when it's outside the womb, and I don't see that we should treat disabled babies.
And yet, virtually every woman who's pregnant will have that 12-week scan, and they'll have those tests done to see if their baby's at risk of Down syndrome. If you've got a high risk, I think 80 or 90% of women do choose to abort at that point.
Well,
so that seems to be a very common.
I think 98% of Down syndrome children are aborted, and I was pleased that the actress Sally Phillips brought attention to this recently. I think we need to question that.
Why?
I do think there's a lot of pressure on women.
That?
I think we need to question why we think it's okay to abort disabled children with Down syndrome. If we then talk about children with Down syndrome as though they should be treated like everybody else, which they should, when they're outside the womb. I think it says something about our attitude, and this is what her point was, I think, in her rather moving program, was that, are you saying to these children, it's better that you don't exist? Is society saying that? Is society saying, your child is simply a problem, we have to eliminate it?
Isn't it actually more about families making a very difficult decision, and not a glib decision, but just a decision that this unborn child, they think, will have a better life if it were not severely disabled?
Well, I think that's completely the wrong way of looking. I'd say.
But hold on a minute. Wait a minute. When I took folic acid, when I took the vitamins, when I ate all the right food and didn't drink alcohol and I didn't smoke anyway, but would never dream of smoking. When you do all those things to try and make sure that your baby is as healthy as possible, surely at that point you're making a statement that you think being not disabled, being fully abled, is better than being not disabled. It doesn't mean you disparage a child that's got Down syndrome or is blind or missing a limb. But the reality is, other things being equal, you'd prefer that.
Well, that's completely true. Of course, I agree. But
then you're saying they've got less value.
Well, no, because here you're deliberately eliminating a life that already has value. So you're targeting a life because of a value judgment, saying that life is not worthy of life. And that's the problem. It's not that it isn't better to be healthy. Of course it isn't. We should try and strive for healthiness. But it's the elimination of the patient with the health problem that is, a problem we see here. We also see it, obviously, in euthanasia debate. Yeah,
absolutely. Fascinating to discuss with you. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Anthony McCarthy. He's Director of Education at SPUC, the pro-life group, the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children. As I say, we did want to speak to a pro-choice campaign group as well, but unable. The vote was only this morning, unable to find one that was able to speak to us after the BMA voted today, an extraordinary vote to decriminalise abortion after 24 weeks. Coming up, we're going to talk about rather lighter topics. The Queen, she's got a £6 million pay increase from public funds because, hey, she needs it more than the nurses. Everyone knows that. We'll talk about that next after an update on the travel.
Talk Radio.
Join the Talk Nation.
Pick up your phone and talk radio.
We'll get you talking.
Uber on Talk Radio. Work or not at the touch of a button.